Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is hautemesstom. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you are new here, my channel is all about loving my collection as it currently is, being critical of new makeup releases, and also paying attention to what we're bringing into our collection, not bringing in too much, making sure we are only bringing in what we can use, and if we are bringing in something that could replace another thing, are we doing that? So this type of video, this is called Let's Play with Makeup, which is basically a get ready with me, except I'm not going anywhere and I don't have intentions to. But my Let's Play with Makeup series is where I play with a bunch of makeup, newer, older, and it's just like it's like extension of figuring out my thoughts on them. Now, like, obviously I have favorite makeup, and obviously I have makeup that I don't like as much, but it's really a way for me to get my hands on things in a real way and think a little bit more critically about the makeup that I already have. So if that kind of content sounds good to you, I would love to have you subscribe if you aren't already, and make sure to like this video so it helps me find more people to watch my videos. And I'm also on Patreon if you'd like to support me there. You can find that all linked down below, as well as my Instagram, etc. This is like a new aspect to Let's Play with Makeup, is that I'm going to, like, essentially maybe not like a story time, but like have discussion topics. And so I thought what would be interesting to talk about today is why I no longer watch Drag Race in a real way, why my relationship with the show has died, and like kind of like just talking about it in general, because I think that'd be fun. Now I will show you what I'm using as I'm playing with it, but we will really talk about it at the end. But I will be starting with my eyes today, and I already have some Mario Badescu lip balm against my lips. I am not feeling 100%. So my voice might sound a little bit off, but you might hear some coughing and some clearing of throat in this video. So, like, I guess content warning for some of you. But also, I did take a COVID test this morning. It's not COVID as of now, but I plan on taking another one later. Should my sore throat, that's really all it is, should that persist, I'll take another one. Let's just get started, and let's have a chat about RuPaul's Drag Race. So to prime the eyes today, I'll be using the Atelier Eye Primer. So I started watching RuPaul's Drag Race in 2016. It kind of happened like this. The best way to describe my relationship with like gay content is that I didn't really before 2016, and this was kind of the start of it. One of my coworkers at the time was telling me that I should watch it, and I just, none of it really resonated with me. I remember seeing GIFs of Drag Race when I used to be on Tumblr, and like seeing posts, and I remember thinking some of it was funny, but I also didn't understand some of it, and my coworker recommended that I start with season 4, and so what I did, in lieu of watching the full episode, I would just watch the runways, because that was like the part to me that was like the most fun. And I really didn't realize that there was like another challenge. I thought like, I didn't really know what happened at the time. So I just thought the runway was like the most important part. So I'd watch the runways, and then I would see who get eliminated. And I would basically be judging the queens based on how they looked. In true fashion, that kind of carried through my tenure as I watched RuPaul's Drag Race. Like, I like a fashion queen. It's like, that's my jam. I set that with the Laura Mercier translucent setting powder, and then I will be using a palette that I made that I haven't posted the video on, but this is like a purple, pink, red sunset fantasy, but I'm only going to be using the purples today because I'm feeling purple. I'm feeling that. I don't know, that's uncommon for me. So I'm gonna play with some purples, maybe bring in some pink to like round things out, but we will see. But I might just be using all shimmers. That's fine. So I started watching from the runway. If you guys don't know what RuPaul's Drag Race is, it's a show that's been on the air for more than a decade now, and drag performers come on a show. They are contestants. RuPaul is one of the hosts and also one of the judges, and then you have celebrity guests, and it's a whole thing, and every week is like a different challenge. And the show really started out kind of as satire of all of the other reality competition shows, so like America's Next Top Model, like any reality show you could think of, it would do a play on it, right? And it was really kind of poking fun at the pop culture zeitgeist. That's how it started, because, and this is like a greater conversation that I'm not fully prepared to have and dive into with you, but drag is subculture, and it still is subculture, but it's now more in the mind of more people, right? Like more people have access to drag now and more people know about its existence and know how to find it because of RuPaul's Drag Race. But that has also created some culture problems where people are watching RuPaul's Drag Race but also not going to local drag shows and showing love to their local performers. And the level of difference of drag from someone who goes on to RuPaul's Drag Race and what you see in real life, that's going to be very different because a lot of the people who you see perform in your hometown don't have the money or the resources that some of the queens who do go on to RuPaul's Drag Race have. So if you're expecting to see someone who looks like Cameron Michaels at your local bar, you might see someone who has it really put together, but you're also going to see a lot of people wearing corsets and underwear, and that's the best they can do. So it, creates a bit of a dichotomy. Anyway, that's besides the point. I'm not talking about Drag Race's the greater repercussions of Drag Race, RuPaul's Drag Race existing on TV, but those are some things to consider too. And those are things that part of the reasons why I ended up not enjoying the show anymore. Anyway, I need to start doing my makeup. I would watch the runway, which happens every episode, and there's a category, and every person dresses up in their interpretation of whatever the category is. Categories could be as simple as pants or as complex as construction worker eleganza extravaganza, or it could be really whatever you want it to be. Like denim could be, for example, was one of them. So I'd watch that all the way through judging, not realizing they were judging, at first, not really realizing they were judging, another thing that happened on the show. So sometimes they'll do, short skits where they, act, and sometimes they'll do improv. Don't really love those ones. So, sometimes they'll do, lip sync numbers, and those are always really nice because many drag performers, that is what they are doing in their hometown. They are lip sync artists. So a lot of people succeed at that with obviously some people don't do as good as other people, and then we have eliminations and whatever. This is going to be an interesting take on an eye look because it is already sparkly, and that is my transition shade. Oh, it's going to be pretty though. I'm actually kind of living. Look at all the reflecting. So then when I realized and basically watched a whole season of Drag Race with no context, I went back and I watched it again with some more context and really fell in love with it. It takes a while to really start understanding the verbiage and that, or at least it did for me. I do feel like I hear more and more people using that type of language in real life, but also a lot of the language used in the earlier seasons is now considered passé and a bit misogynist. So take that into consideration too. A lot of the verbiage has changed from the earlier seasons to the way they talk about things now. So rewatched the season, really fell in love with seasons 5 and 6. And the reason I never really watched Drag Race before was as someone who, I live in Pittsburgh, but I grew up in further in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, right? I wasn't living in the city for most of my life. And so I moved into the city around this time, right? So I really didn't have a sense of a queer identity because there were, not that there weren't queer people from where I grew up, but I was visibly queer. I was someone who was visibly queer, but I also didn't know what I was doing. I didn't take on media or anything that was queer, and I didn't have a lot of queer people surrounding me in my personal life. So everything I learned was on the internet or whatever. So because of some internalized misogyny and homophobia that I had yet to work through, watching drag seemed untouchable, right? I felt like it was something I shouldn't be doing and something that other people wouldn't get. And obviously that seems to be a problem that I have found with a lot of queer people is because of the femininity of drag, and I feel a lot of drag performers experience internalized homophobia and misogyny against them, especially when they're trying to date, because a lot of people devalue femininity and things that are supposed to be feminine. So it's a whole big to-do, right? There was a lot for me to unpack, and that's not what this video is really about. But just know that was why I found Drag Race pretty unapproachable initially, because I was afraid of the femme. And isn't that funny now to look at me and hear me saying I'm afraid of the feminine, right? I just really was, because I was like, ew, people who are into Drag Race, they're like too gay. It's a lot. There's a lot. If you don't have queer people around you that are having these like larger discussions, you probably don't even think about it. But like, these are the things that like we have to like consciously unpack and work on as individuals, to really flourish. Because and it like takes a lot of work, and it's ever constant. Like, you will find yourself doing and saying things that you're like, oh, that doesn't like align with what I'm saying. Like, why do I think that? So it's a lot to unpack. Okay, moving on. Fell in love with the show. Ended up watching like the whole back catalog of seasons except for season 1, which, like, if you're new here, it was a lost season for a while. Like, there was no way to watch it because of song rights, and I think it was Beyonce's fault because they used a Destiny's Child song as a lip sync for your life. Oh, by the way, at the end of every episode, the bottom 2 contestants lip sync for their life, and it's a song chosen by production, and they lip sync, and it's very fun. Okay, that's how people get eliminated. It's a whole to-do. After watching the back catalog, the first season I got to watch live, and if you are a Drag Race fan, you know. If you know, you know. Honestly, like what I'm about to say, the first season I got to watch in real time was All Stars 2. That was the first season of Drag Race I got to lay my eyes on in real time. And when I tell you, it was the first time I got to have a favorite while the show was airing. Didn't go well for me. I guess, general spoiler alert, because I'm not going to try to watch myself, but like, Tati was my fave, and I like, you know what? I'm like really not, I'm still not over it. I'm still not over the way things Tati played out the first time or the second time. Like, still doesn't sit well with me. Like, I still hate it. And obviously, we'll get to the fandom in a moment. I obviously don't have, for a while, I had some animosity that I felt towards Alaska, but like, obviously, I like never tweeted about it or whatever. Like, you know, I never did online bullying, which is a problem we'll come back to. Hold on to your horses, because we will get to it. But also, if you are here because you like looked for Drag Race content on YouTube, this isn't what I normally do. I normally put on makeup, but like, you can save your comments about like how wrong I am for another time. I think that it's okay for us to have discourse, and I'm not condemning anyone who watches the show. I do not think the show is stupid. That is not the bullet point that we are getting to here at the end. So I'm gonna need you to like have some patience and give me some space and grace to really express myself here. Anyways, I mean, if you're gonna stick around for the whole thing, if you're not, whatever, go ahead, pop off in the comments, because I know you're gonna anyway. So the next year I watched Drag Race Live. I watched season 9. It was like really fun. Watched it in real time. Got my friend into Drag Race. Like one of my close friends growing up who moved into the city as well. And so we like kind of went on a Drag Race journey together, and like, oh God, it was just the most fun. Just the absolute most fun. Over the course of 2017, that is how I met my friend Tiffany. And story for another time, but Tiffany and I met through listening to another podcast. I got really big into like listening to podcasts in 2017. I had like a pretty long commute to and from work, and so like podcasts were like a really great way for me to like fill the time to and from work. Tiffany and I met in December of 2017 for the first time in real life. We had talked before then because we actually were on like a Snapchat group that the podcast that we listened to had. And we met once, and then in 2018, we, like, literally the second time we ever saw each other in real life was at my house recording a podcast about RuPaul's Drag Race. So we started the podcast, It Bears Repeating, another RuPaul's Drag Race recap show. And that really came to be because my brother was going to start a podcast, had bought all the equipment, and I was like, do you mind if, like, me and a friend, like, bum your equipment, and then we have our own podcast, and, like, we'll, like, alternate recording times, like, have a whole thing. Well, my brother's podcast never really came to fruition, so we kind of, like, commandeered this, and with many growing pains, we started our own RuPaul's Drag Race podcast. And we came into the RuPaul's Drag Race recapping podcast world at the like the best possible time. Like I don't know how else to describe it, is that like Woo Out the Bam, like we were pulling in like good numbers, and we kind of, there are like two really big Drag Race podcasts. Well, at the time there's one, like I would say the ultimate RuPaul's Drag Race podcast is All Right Mary. So it was All Right Mary, and they were good friends with the Squirrel Friends, which is now a defunct podcast. But both of the people who were hosts of Squirrel Friends have their own projects. Wow, I feel like such like a RuPaul's Drag Race podcast historian. We kind of got in with them, and then they started recommending us like as an alternative. Not an alternative, but like if you want to keep listening to people talk about RuPaul's Drag Race, these people are good, right? So they kind of recommended us. So like we started getting like overlap listenership with some of the other Drag Race podcasts, and it like people really enjoyed our banter, and like it kind of worked out like it's very funny. It's like very funny how it worked out. So like All Right Mary does like deep dives, like they talk about the cultural relevance and like the things, and like, and I'm not saying this in like a negative way, but like kind of have like a social justice warrior aspect to the way they approach the show. So like when things would go awry, they would talk about like the greater ramifications of like what was said, what was done. That was kind of their gig. Squirrel Friends would be like your friends who had a cocktail and you're like just chit-chatting about the show after it has happened. And like our show, I would say, is like somewhere in between. We would get like really heated about some of the things that would happen on the show, like that would spark greater conversation on the podcast. Like so we kind of took off, right? So we had like I don't know, by the end of our tenure as Drag Race podcasters, when we were like exclusively covering RuPaul's Drag Race, we could pull up to like 1,500 to 2,000 people per episode. But like that was kind of like pretty short-lived because we like hit our peak and then things started happening. So we covered All Stars 3. That was like our trial run. That was the first season we covered in real time. And then we covered season 10. So season 10, if you're not familiar with the show, is an interesting season. It has, there's a contestant on that season named the Vixen. And the Vixen really came in very politically charged, wanted to talk about like her experience in drag and out of drag, like in a racial context. And I don't want to call her aggressive, but like, I think it felt aggressive to people who were on the show. And so just a controversial figure that I don't know that I even have my feelings about her now sorted out. So the season kind of got exhausting to talk about because the Vixen had a very good run on the show. And just like to have to talk about her, and like that became like kind of a burden, and we were just like kind of waiting for her to go. And like we really made a conscious effort to like never like diss a drag. Like we never wanted to like just flat out discount someone's talent. Like these people put a lot of hard work in there, and even if they're not our favorite, we know that like they are really doing a lot of work, even if it's not to what we want to watch, right? And I'm gonna throw some of this Fenty all over Diamond Balm. I don't really know what the right word is, and I'm just gonna throw that on top. If we're gonna go shiny, we might as well. Towards the end or like the middle of this season, I really, at the time, while we were covering the show, I really liked RuPaul, right? I like had a good time watching RuPaul. Maybe towards the end of season 10, RuPaul made some whack-ass statements in an interview that he did where he talked about like basically that trans contestants who had operations to affirm their gender had some kind of leg up in the competition, and like so like essentially kind of saying like they avoid casting these people. And that just really fucked me and Tiffany off, like in a real way. And it fucked a lot of people off. So our narrator, the person that we trusted to host the show, is now someone like we kind of view as a villain. And not only that, RuPaul doubled down and like never really apologized for it. Like he like said like we've never casted like we only want to cast people with charisma, uniqueness, nerve, and talent, blah blah blah, like all of that. But it was just like, so now there was kind of no way for like, I don't even know what I would have wanted RuPaul to do, but it was like he doubled down. I didn't feel satisfied with like the way he handled things, and that was kind of that. So I had to pause here and come back. I will have foundation on when I come back, but I need to film a clip for a different video, and it's a foundation review. So I'm back and I have foundation on. RuPaul started spewing some transphobic rhetoric. Now, if you're not familiar with drag history, my room is a mess. I did a very poor job here, so I am just inserting this clip. Trans drag performers are like very pivotal to drag culture and how kind of drag came to be, and that's not something I'm going to elaborate on here. I'm going to encourage you to seek out other information. I'm going to have some links down below. Peppermint responded directly to Ru's rhetoric that he spewed in that interview and the tweets that followed. Peppermint, if you're not familiar, is a contestant from season 9 of RuPaul's Drag Race, and she came out as trans on the show and ended up being the runner-up of that season, so did very well. And so if you want to hear her thoughts on it and like what her takeaway was from it, I highly encourage you to do so. It's 25 minutes long, but there's a lot to unpack here, right, that I'm not going to do. That's not really my goal of the video. This is like kind of a part of my falling out with it. But I highly encourage you to seek out things like Paris is Burning. I don't even know that I have like the best grasp on all of this, right? So I'm just encouraging us all to continue learning by saying this. Trans people and trans performers are like very pivotal to the culture of and around drag, and they've always been here, and they are very important to also the LGBTQIA like movements that have happened. So I just think it's very important for me to clearly point out how important they are to our community and how just stupid it was that RuPaul said those things. And it's something I'm still very upset with RuPaul about, and RuPaul has been casting more trans contestants, and people who have come out as trans have come back to the show to perform in All-Star seasons. So like we can all take away what we want to take away, right? Ru has apologized. Whether or not we all take his apology and accept it is up to us, right? So I'm not telling you to dislike the show because of this reason either. I just wanted to point this out real quick. So I don't know if this blurb did any better than I tried to explain it in the video, but again, I just encourage you to seek out information on these topics because it's like very important to LGBTQIA history. Okay, back to my video. So it just doesn't make any sense, right? Like it just like felt weird that like this is somehow like where we landed. Contouring and bronzing. Today I'm going to be using this one from the Burberry Glow Essentials palette, and I will be using a Sonia G classic base brush to apply the bronzer. So RuPaul says all that weird stuff, right? And it doesn't sit well with us. So then we start distrusting who we have as a host, and that's kind of a problem, right? Like, well, I don't trust this person anymore. I don't trust how their views in the world. How am I supposed to trust them to judge this show? I hate it. And it's like him saying all of those things is just such a spit on the face to any contestant who either came out as trans on the television show, which happened multiple times, or people who came out as trans and non-binary after the television show. So it just felt like so just incredibly yucky. It felt bad. And not only that, RuPaul doubled down, and Michelle, his like best friend and one of the judges on the panel, like tried to come to his defense, and like she like did the best she could, and I don't harbor like any ill will towards Michelle for that specific moment that she had. That made me start feeling a little bit icky, but you know, we were still loving the show. We still love the contestants, so we persevere, and we had a great, very like active listenership, like the people who would message us regularly. But because it's like RuPaul's Drag Race and randoms were finding us, we also got some like very heated comments, and like we got called in a couple times. I'm gonna be like very clear about that. Like there were some things that Tiffany and I said that like were misguided, and we had some wonderful listeners who took the time to say like, hey, like the way that Tom said this or the way that Tiffany said this like didn't feel good to me. Like, have you ever considered this? Like, and like that happened, right? Like, I'm not going to say that we didn't like have some missteps, and I'm not going to try to claim that we didn't have some missteps. After season 10, which felt like a really long season, and I believe it's a season that has like more episodes than usual or something. Like season 8 was a very short season, and that was because of All-Stars 2. It's a whole thing, right? Like you'll have to get into the lore of that if you really care. Anyway, we get to the after, and that was the first time they did an All-Stars right into a regular season or vice versa. So we were basically talking about Drag Race for like half a year. And like that was kind of like, we were just kind of losing steam, right? And so then throughout the summer, we like casually covered season 3, like retrospectively, season 3 of Drag Race, and took our time. I like don't really remember what happened the rest of that summer, like what we did. We like covered season 3, I remember that. And then we started covering season 4. And then the new season of Drag Race got announced. And I believe, I can't remember, so I could be wrong. So no need to type, I could be wrong. But I can't remember if All Stars 4 happened before or after season 11. But either way, you know what? This feels like something I need to fact check. Hold please while I Google this. I had to double check because I was like, I'm having a lapse here. So All Stars 4 happened before season 11. So we covered All Stars 4. All Stars 4 was like a mess of a season for a number of reasons. Like there were a lot of production choices that like just like didn't make sense. And when we were analyzing this show, right? So like we would like talk about production and what we thought production was up to, right? And like all of that. So like you get very heady. And not only that, I was watching Drag Race once to watch it, a second time to take notes, and then talking about the show for like 2, sometimes 3 hours before editing. It was consuming a lot of my life, and like there were some things like specifically that was like energy that was happening like within the podcast, like some, and not animosity, I don't want to say that because that's making it sound really weird, but like we were having like issues with the consistency and whatever between us being on the show and whatever. And so season 4 went really poorly. They did a double winner, and it was just like a bizarre season. It's like a season I actually like never intend on revisiting. Like I didn't like it that much. And like I've watched so many other Drag Race seasons, like so many times, tens of times, like watched many times, right? I watched season 5 the most, I'm pretty sure. And then season 6 is not far behind. I'm gonna powder my face with the Chantecaille blurring powder and the smooth buffer brush from Sonia G. I'm testing out these Sonia G brushes. I have thoughts, but I'm gonna do a Sonia G brush video at some point, so keep your eyes peeled for that, but it will probably be at the beginning of next month, only because I really just wanna, I wanna use them and just like have fully well thought out thoughts, I guess, is really what I'm getting at here. So then season 11 started. And season 11, there was something about the vibe that was wrong. Like, and I don't know how else to describe it, and I can't even remember, but I remember hating to watch each week. I remember hating talking about it each week. Silky Nutmeg Ganache was like a hard person to watch in her original season. And again, I'm very careful not to, like, while we were very frustrated with Silky's behavior, we would never send hate to her, right? Like, but we were just like kind of frustrated with like the way she behaved and like things that she was doing on the show, and like it was just like, oh, like we got to the point where we were just like pretty over her, and then like Vanessa Vanjie Mateo made it too far, and then it was just, and then we got to the end, and it was just like, who cares? Although I think Evie is a great winner, and I still think that Evie was a great winner. I'm going to be using a blush from that same Burberry palette. But by the end of it, we were like kind of so exhausted. Again, still not fully trusting RuPaul. Like we were coming for RuPaul's wig pretty hard. I'm pretty sure that season. Like we were like, and then what? It's raining. just because of the podcast and because of how season 11 went, I was ready to bow out of like the RuPaul's Drag Race game at that time. But me and my co-host Tiffany, and obviously my very good friend, you've seen her on this channel, we've whatever I'm about to say we've already worked through, so there's no hard feelings. But like it was like I felt like I was doing like a lot of the work, and I was showing up more than Tiffany, and I didn't want to cover Drag Race. I think I hated season 4 so much I had asked for us to not cover season 11 and like to continue covering old seasons, because those were what brought me joy. That's like what brought me to the franchise as it was. And it was just like the way I was feeling about RuPaul, like, you know, it was just like all of these things were like really like boiling to the highest heavens. And I will be using my fingers to apply the Moon Pillar highlighter from Ritual Diffie. We talked about it, and Tiffany wanted to try getting through one more season of the show. So we waited till the next year, and then COVID hit. So season 12 is like a weird season because like there was a contestant on it that they disqualified for like I can't get into it all here, but the contestant's name was Jerry Pie, and if you want to see more into that, so that was like how the season started. Like that happened before March, right? Like, and then COVID hit, and then it was like such a bizarre season to cover. And not to speak out of line, but like Tiffany, not that everyone handled that the quarantine months how they handled the quarantine months, and so I'm not saying anything that I say here is like not said with judgment. But like it hit Tiffany like much harder than me. I'm someone who can isolate on my own without the pandemic being part of that experience. We were recording remotely, and that was like fine because we both have mics, like, right? But what was occurring is that like, again, like because of the way Tiffany, and there was no judgment even in real time, but like we weren't putting out episodes consistently because there was a global pandemic, right? And not only that, we had decided not to like talk about, there's a post show called Untucked for Drag Race that like, that's like where a lot of the drama and behind the scenes stuff lives. And we were like, we weren't going to cover that. And it was like a whole thing. And then I think by the end of Drag Race, like that season of Drag Race was when George Floyd had died. And so then it just like, it was just like, it was a lot to take on, right? And I could just like, I could tell that my heart wasn't in it, and I told her we wouldn't cover another season. Beyond that, so like that's kind of like where like the falling out began. But I was like, well, maybe if we don't cover a season, I will enjoy watching it. But I didn't even bother. I think, what did I watch? There was an All-Stars season, and I did watch that, but we didn't cover it. And so I did enjoy it more not covering it, but I still didn't have like I didn't like enjoy it like I once did. And that's okay, right? Like we're allowed to ebb and flow with what we like. But it got to the point where like my brain could not shut off watching it without thinking about like, I couldn't just enjoy the show. At one point when I was watching Drag Race, it was like kind of a form of escapism for me. But now when I watch the show, it's like, okay, like this person's thinking that and they're doing this, and this person is like being edited like this and that and that. And I can't shut that part of my brain off anymore. So like I kind of like shot myself in the foot for like being able to like enjoy the show just as a viewer. And I did watch All Stars 6, which was the one that just happened. But again, they pulled some tomfoolery in production and editing, and I didn't like it. And I said, I made it all the way through up until the second to last episode, or the last episode, when Trinity K. Bonet got eliminated. I was just like, this is just nonsense, and I like couldn't watch anymore. And I really loved Trinity, and I didn't think Trinity was going to win. However, Trinity had earned her place in the finale, and they just like snagged it away from her at the tail end, and that felt like absolute garbage, hot trash nonsense to me. And it was definitely something that was set up by production, because they brought a queen back the last week. Like they had a top 4, and they normally stop at top 4. Like that's normally when the finale is. They did this whole hullabaloo of an episode where they did like a lip sync for your life, and they like really fucked over Silky during that. And I actually didn't watch that whole episode because I got halfway through and I was like, you know what? I bet Silky gets all the way to the last one and they don't let her back on. And that's exactly what happened. And it like really fired me up because I was like, wow, I didn't like that twist of like bringing someone back in that fashion. I thought, wow, Silky worked really hard every week. You would have to watch the season to really understand. Worked really hard every week to be able to come back to the show, and they just simply said no. And again, I did not see that last lip sync, and I've heard that like the person who won it rightfully won it, but okay, whatever. It still just didn't feel good to me, like, you know. And it's like, of course, that like it's like a fan in me speaking, but it's also like, how heartbreaking is it to like watch someone be so close and then like get eliminated? And that goes both for Silky and for Trinity. These people who like put their whole heart and soul to like being on the show, and it's like snagged away. And again, I understand that everyone can't win, but like if there were people who deserved spots in the finale, it was like, I think that you can make an argument for either one of those people. The heartbreaking thing was during the episode where Silky was lip syncing to, and Eureka eventually gets back on the show. You can look at Trinity and she fucking knows, right? Whenever you're talking about an all-star season, they've already gone through like the cycle of production and seeing how they get edited one time. So they come back a little bit smarter, right? Trinity knew. Everyone knew. The second that this twist was like shown to us and like we were shown what was going to happen, it was like Trinity's out. And Trinity knew. Trinity knew that there was like nothing that could happen after that would get her to the finale. And like how devastating. Because like, you watch Drag Race and you know that not everyone's on an even playing field. And you might think that just because of the status and the resources and the effort put in by the queen, but no, like there's also like production things happening, and it just started getting so heavy-handed to me personally, and that's how it started feeling to me. And other people disagree with me, and like that's totally fine. We were allowed to have, I think, differing opinions on that it just like stopped becoming fun for me. Going kind of back a little bit to talking about not this one, we have an open one. I'm gonna set my face with Fix Plus from Mac. Much like YouTube, me and Tiffany fully understood that like obviously we're gonna get feedback if people listen to us, and we happened like I have not had a greater online presence than I did in the time that we were at our peak. So I would say like between season 10 and season 11, like end of season 10, we were doing really well. Season 11, we did fairly well. The reviews that we would get, would be just like, so just, sometimes they would just be like so out of pocket and to be completely mean. Like, so we used to record on a hardwood floor, which is like not the best recording, admittedly, but like it was kind of like well known that like my dog would walk around in the background and you could hear her. And like some people found that endearing, and then some people did not like that. Some people didn't like that. Like just people found like the most nitpicky things, and like hearing these things like over and over again just like really kind of eats at you, and just in such a way. And I think I'm more prepared for it now. Like if something were to happen and my YouTube channel were to take off, like it would still be tough, but I think these scenarios like have prepped me for them. And there wasn't like, I can't think of like a specific one, but I do remember people would come at Tiffany for being someone who was AFAB talking about drag. People would come at me because I wasn't someone who did drag, but like, it was, and it's that's fine. And like, but like, we're also allowed to like have it, but like people pretended that like we were the only RuPaul's Drag Race podcast, and like they had to listen to us, and that simply wasn't the case. And it's like, you don't have to subscribe to us. And I'm the kind of person, like, if I don't like a podcast, or if I start watching a YouTube video and I'm not into it, I just bounce away. I don't feel the need to like be like, I don't need to feel the need to like leave criticism. No, some people would leave us constructive criticism, like maybe you should try this, and like I never minded that. Like if you're gonna come at me with like a suggestion on how to be better at what I'm doing, I'm gonna hear it. But if you're just gonna complain about my dog, what is your solution? Like we didn't have at the time another place in the house to record where there wasn't hardwood floor, so I could have put a carpet down underneath us, but the dog is gonna traipse around with the whole floor on that, because we recorded upstairs. That's why I'm pointing upstairs. But like the whole floor up there is hardwood. So the dog's going to click-clack around unless I carpet the floor. I'm not going to carpet the floor for my podcast that I don't really make that much money off of. That's not going to be what's going to happen. And then another thing, I think the thing that like really probably killed it between me and Tiffany, and why we really had to stop it, is we would try to see what people were saying online to give like more context to what was going on, and like try to get a feel of like what the fandom thought of things happening on the show, so we could like bring that conversation to our podcast. So we would go on Reddit and see what people on Reddit are saying about the show. Also, one time I saw what people on Reddit were saying about our podcast. Many people were very nice. It was very nice, but it's that thing where you see like one really nasty comment and you're like, wow, I really hate this. I like never want to do this again. So I've already learned not to Google myself to see what people are saying about me. So like if someone posted my video somewhere, I'll never know unless someone comments and be like, I saw your video on so-and-so's Twitter or so-and-so's website. Like you can bring that information to me, but I sure as hell am not going to seek it out anymore. Again, that's a tough thing to learn. And if you ever, I'm sure you've heard this advice but if you ever get in a situation where like people might comment on what you do on the internet freely, never try to seek it out. Just my advice to you is absolutely never try to seek that information out. You will not enjoy that. You just won't. Okay. That's Mama Day's advice as far as don't do that. Okay. As far as like a lip goes, I think I might just do, I just did a nude gloss yesterday, but paraphernalia. Of course it's paraphernalia. This is from Pat McGrath. I'm not even gonna take my lip balm off. I don't think that's a thing I need to do. That felt like the move. So my face is done. I'm going to continue talking. Seeing people in the fandom literally reaching out to these drag queens to tell them off, to tell them that they're terrible, to tell them that they suck. And all, like, it's rampant, and there's rampant racism and misogyny within the Drag Race fandom, and we were starting to see it. Like, I will say, like, I complained about the way people talked about us on the internet and, like, the way people would leave feedback in our podcast reviews. That would never really have, like, ended why I would watch Drag Race. Like, that really has nothing to do with, like, that was, like, a learning curve. But, like, you know, if these are the type of people who are, like, threatening to kill a drag queen because they do not like them, and then they find my podcast and they disagree with me, they're also going to send that same vitriolic thoughts to me, right? Or Tiffany. Or I've seen and read what other people were giving feedback to other podcast hosts who cover Drag Race. It just got nasty. Us constantly, like, living in that cycle of seeing the fandom. And of course, I'm not blaming the entire fandom. I don't think that everyone in the fandom, we curated, like, quite a wonderful small little group of people that I still talk to this day from our podcast, like people who listened to us. I follow a lot of them on Instagram. They follow me on Instagram. I have, like, friendships with those people. I have another podcast with someone that used to listen to Drag Race, and now we do a podcast together. So we had, like, a really good group. Our group wasn't, like, part of the problem. The people who often interacted with us weren't part of the problem. But their fuse was so short with what they were, like, able to hear you out on in the space that it was just like, oh, no. And so as Drag Race has continued past my time viewing, I watched All Star 6, but I did not watch season 13. I am not watching season 14. I'm not watching Drag Race versus the World. I'm not, like, Drag Race UK versus the World. I'm not watching any of that anymore, because what once felt like something that was, like, made for me and made for a lot of people, and, like, arguably saved a lot of people's lives with, like, its existence, right? And of course, I, like, always want people to get their bag, but, like, I don't want RuPaul to get his bag because I don't trust him. And there's all of these franchises, and it's just like, what used to be something that I felt like a lot of people spent a lot of love, time, and consideration in. And I'm talking about, like, the production, the people involved with the show. I'm never talking about the queens who participate on the show. What used to feel like something that was, like, a labor of love for everyone is now something that, like, sold out and just it, like, isn't the same feeling anymore. And you can tell, like, RuPaul's investment in the show diminishes as time goes on. Like, right around season 7, Ru is really kind of checking out, and it's like, it's a paycheck. Same with season 8. And, like, obviously now the franchise has grown so much that it's like, how would Ru even remember any of the queens that he met in the last year, let alone the people who were on season 1, right? And it's just like, you know what? Final thoughts on RuPaul's Drag Race and why my relationship ended with it. Because I'm rambling, and I know that. So you don't have to clock me, I know. I hear it up here. I see it. I know that. Those are things that clocked, mama. It doesn't feel as special to me. It's not as important to me as it once was. And I just, like, don't feel that affection for it. Now, I still watch the seasons that I love over and over again because I feel like this, like, warm, fuzzy feeling. And I do, like, whenever the new queens come out, I, like, check them out. I think it's exciting that these people are getting this opportunity to share their gifts with the world. Like, I think that's so fun and it's very exciting. And I love that happening every season, right? And I love that that are queer people getting this platform. I'm not going to talk about Maddie Morphosis because I'm not even watching the season, but I, like, have thoughts and feelings about Maddie being on the show, but not negative thoughts about Maddie existing or Maddie doing drag. Those aren't the things I have. I have other feelings, right? But anyway, it just, like, doesn't hold that space in my heart anymore. And when I was just watching it to watch it without knowing, like, what the fans were doing, not ever thinking about the production, I just, like, can't watch the show without, like, thinking, like, oh, this, that, and the other, right? It's like a place that I can't, and I just, like, don't want to keep up. And there was a flash in the pan moment where, like, Drag Race almost got me back whenever I thought I was falling out of love with it. There are 2 seasons of Drag Race Thailand, and you have to read subtitles. It's tough. And this was back when there was someone on Twitter who would subtitle Drag Race Thailand. They took the time, wrote out all of the subtitles, and did it, and like would share it. I do want to just add to that the person who on Twitter, and if I'm going to Google to find them, I hope I can find them. What they also did is they provided cultural context to what was going on. So for someone like me who lives in America and doesn't know a lot about the culture in Thailand and what was really going on, they would provide that context that was like sometimes very necessary for jokes to land or things to be funny, or whenever they did Snatch Game, which is a famous episode every season where the contestants impersonate a famous person, there were a lot of people who I didn't know what they were impersonating because I don't know a lot of the people who are famous in Thailand. So that person also gave context to that, and it was just very invaluable, and it was awesome. This person was awesome. There is electricity flowing through the entirety of both seasons of Drag Race Thailand. It's such a different approach, right? The judging panel is very cold on RuPaul's Drag Race. But when you watch Drag Race Thailand, there's no table in between the judges and the contestants. And when the contestants are lip syncing, the judges are screaming, waving their fans, like having the best time, and not just like watching with stone cold faces. Or it's just like, it just like, that was like what that felt really good. And if there was like more of that on Drag Race, like that'd be something I'm very interested in. But like that's just like not how Drag Race works. And it's such a well-oiled machine. It does feel like it's, if you're not in the gay community, or if you're not in like the LGBTQIA community, there's like kind of this discourse, like Twitter discourse, I guess is the best way to describe it, is like, what is gay but made for straight people? And I feel like RuPaul's Drag Race is now something that is gay, is LGBTQ, but it is made for straight people's eyes, straight people's viewing, for their pleasure. And there's also things that are straight that feel gay, like feel like they are made for gay people. And I don't have an example of that. But like, that's what the thing is. It's just like, when I watch it, I just don't feel like it's made for me anymore. And that's okay. And I'm glad. And I want the show to continue. But it doesn't mean I have to be a part of its journey, right? I want there to be an opportunity for drag performers to have a platform and to get to go on the show and be as exposed as they would like to be, and like do with the platform what they want to do, as long as it's good, right? Like there some people that don't use their platform well, but I'm just saying, like, that's what I want. But the fact that like on RuPaul's Drag Race we've never had a drag king, and then on the flip side there's Dragula, which I love, but I didn't really love the last season because I felt like it started feeling like when Drag Race turned. And I understand that like when you change networks there's different expectations, like I understand that, but once it starts feeling like it's not made for me anymore, it's like, okay, it's time for me to check out. Because I don't want what happened to me and RuPaul's Drag Race to happen with me and Dragula, where I was like, maybe I should like just not watch the next season, because it's like, I didn't really feel good about the last season, and like, I'll just end up watching it and hating it, and like, what's the point of that, right? So that's why I've stepped out of the Drag Race culture. I love that people are still watching and very excited, and I hope the show continues running. Again, I love that there is a platform for LGBTQIA people, but with, I guess, exceptions, right? I just hope to see that the show evolves and continues evolving and includes more AFAB contestants, includes more trans contestants, trans men, trans women, all of the people. I want to see all of the people. I want to, but like the thing is, like, I think we talked about this a lot too. Like, there has never been, like, at least in my time, there was never an Asian contestant who won the show. And there's never been like a Latinx contestant that has like won the show. And like, it's just like all about like, it's like, why does that keep happening? And like, what is that about? And like, there's never been, let me think about this. There's never been like a plus size contestant who's won really the show, at least in America. I don't think. I feel like all of the American winners are like normal sized bodies. And I say that loosely for lack of a better term. Anyway, I'm shutting up. So that was like my wicked wild relationship to RuPaul's Drag Race and why I don't really watch the show anymore. But let's review. For the eyeshadow, I used a Melt shade, a shade from Sugar Pill, some Pat McGrath, and then I used this shade from Cleona on the lids. I'm not actually going to label them all. If you're curious, you can ask down below. I will figure it out for you if that's something that you're interested in. But when it comes to singles, it's like, it's a bit of work to like get all of that. And I'm already recording this and editing it. So like, it's going to be what it's going to be. Had really fun putting all the purple on my eyes. I think it looks really good. I really like all of this that's happening. It feels very early Tom in makeup. The purples on my eyes. Like, this is like very old school. Not that the application method is old school, but like, this is like the colors that I used to pick. Pinks, purples. This is like all I wanted to wear. I have this on my lids, but it's not really doing the most today, but it is there. It's what's giving me that glossy sheen on top of all of the eyeshadows. I really like this product. For those of you who aren't new here, you know, but the Chantecaille blurring powder is like my favorite powder. I use it in every single video. Even if I use Laura Mercier translucent setting powder or an hourglass powder, I'm still also going to be reaching for that. Ritual Defy highlighters are my favorite and continue to be. So Moon Pillar, love playing with that today. And this is probably the biggest surprise. This is my first time using this bronzer with one of the Sonia G brushes, and I think that it looks so much better than it does the other ways I've applied it. It looks much more natural on my skin, and I think that's excellent. I love that. And then I also used this deeper of the two blushes in this palette, and it looks really great on the cheek underneath Moon Pillar. Paraphernalia, look at that. It's almost gone. It only has a couple more uses, and I need to get it out of my collection because it's old. So it was nice using that today. Love Fix Plus. I use it in every context. The Bobbi Brown Vitamin Rich Face Base is like my favorite primer. Well, one of my favorite primers. And the Big Moon Mascara, I actually didn't like love putting it on today. It felt really gloopy. I had to go in with another spoolie to kind of separate the lashes, which I didn't love, but the lashes look okay now that I fuss with them, but I hate that I had to fuss with them. Like, I don't like a mascara that's like that. And actually, I think my skin looks great. I'll zoom you in so you can see the look up close. I have no concealer on, so take in the foundation as you wish. I did apply it with my hands today. That wraps up the video. If you are not already subscribed and you spent some time with me and you like makeup and, you know, me complaining about how I don't like watching RuPaul's Drag Race anymore, you can go ahead and subscribe and go ahead and like this video before you head off into the sunset. I appreciate you for watching the video if you're going to stop it right here. I'm also on Patreon if you want to subscribe to me there. This weekend, I believe I will have a video up of me testing my Sonia G brushes versus the other brushes I would use to apply cream products or other tools I would use to apply cream products. That's going to be exclusive to patrons because they were very excited about the Sonia G brushes when I talked about them, about having them. So I'm going to give that to them. And also, of course, I'll talk about all of the random nonsense that I always talk about when I talk about stuff on Patreon. I have a podcast called Recollect. It's a music podcast. We look at music countdowns from history, but whether they be from the Billboard Hot 100 or whatever other lists we can find that have been compiled from major news sources to people who just blogged and what they thought and talk about their experiences. So we go through every song, we bop or stop the song, and it's a lot of fun. We are exclusive to Spotify, and I said this in my last video that we aren't excited that like that's the platform that we have to be on, but it is the platform that we have to be on to legally produce the podcast the way that we do. So that is why that is happening on Spotify. But please check that out if you want to spend some more time with me, but just vocally. And I do sing, so get into it. I didn't say I sing well, but like I do sing on the podcast. That's a different statement, so just don't get it twisted. Okay? Appreciate you all so much for watching. And remember to follow your hote, and you will find me. Thank you so much again for watching. I will see you in my next video. My next video. Bye, friends.